enough for theater. Yes, my dear. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. You probably hear it, my accent, I'm Swiss. And my first language, my mother language is German. And then comes French. And then Spanish and English I just picked up. So I hope you understand me. It's a long, long time ago. Nobody knows how long, but I guess at least 6,000 years in the past, when gigantic spaceships revolved around the old Earth. How, for heaven's sake, would one know that? We know it from ancient India. Many old Indian texts exist, and there you can read in detail that thousands of years ago, gigantic spaceships revolved around our planet. Of course, the ancient Indians don't call these objects spaceships. They called them cities on the firmament. They didn't have a word for spaceship at that time. One day, smaller vehicles flew down from these cities to the earth. The ancient Indians called these smaller vehicles Vimanas. One of the humans, his name was Arjuna, was taken up to these cities here on the firmament. He learned the language of the extraterrestrials, and he was an eyewitness even of a war in heaven. 3 cities came together in the firmament. 2 of them were destroyed. For the people on earth, it looked as if 10,000s of shooting stars were falling down. This is one of the cities in the firmament according to the old Indian writing in the 5th book, Mahabharata. And this here is one of the so-called Vimanas, the smaller vehicles. Arjuna, the man who was brought up there, even mentioned the name of his pilot. His pilot's name was Matali, who brought him up there. Arjuna learned the language and realized that these beings in these cities, they had conflicts among them. That's why it comes to a war in heaven. Now, was this all just the imagination? Fantasies? No. The details are too precise and they are linked with other old writings from around the world. Now I ask myself, what is heaven? I was educated as a Christian, as a Catholic, and they told me when I was a boy, heaven is the place of absolute happiness. Heaven is the place where we are united with God. But even in our Christian Jewish tradition, it all starts with a war in heaven. Do you remember the story of the archangel Lucifer? He went to the throne of the Almighty God and said, "We don't serve you anymore." Then God ordered the archangel Michael to fight against Lucifer and to throw him out and his disciples out of heaven. But, ladies and gentlemen, a war in heaven, in a place which is absolutely happiness, is impossible. If you are united with the Almighty God, you are completely happy. And in happiness, you make neither opposition nor war. Therefore, we must change the word heaven into the word space. Why? Because many of our ancestors were brought into the heavens. Not only Arjuna from the Indian mythology, but also the biblical Elijah, Enoch, or our primogenitor Abraham. All these figures were educated in heaven, and when they returned safe to earth. So heaven was space. And what is an angel? We have the same problem with angel. In cave and drug chiselings, the angels are shown with helmets, halos around their heads. In religion, angels are the messengers from heaven. They can fly. They are shown with wings. we must change the word angel into the word extraterrestrial. Angel and the word archangel. An archangel would be the leader of a group of extraterrestrials. Change only 10 words of the old religion texts into modern terms, and the result is a complete new interpretation. And that is exactly what I'm doing in my book. So to come back to these angels, in the second book of the Kings in the Bible, chapter 19, we read that an angel of the Lord killed 185,000 Assyrians. Just like this. No fight, men's against men's. The same story, which we read in the Bible, is also written down in a hieroglyphic text on the temple wall in Edfu. There, one of the gods, in his winged sun disk, destroys all the enemies of the Pharaoh from the air. They did not even see him nor hear him. His ship was so fast. That's a temple in Edfu. And another case is, of course, in the Bible, which you can easily control. I mean, this kind of text you can hardly control, but the Bible you can easily control. I speak about the prophet Ezekiel. You find him at the end of the Old Testament. First, I'd like to show you now 5 pictures of an old Bible, just to show you what our ancestors 200 years ago had thought about Ezekiel. Then I explain you our modern knowledge, our modern translation. And finally, I will show you a computer animation to demonstrate what really happened about 3,000 years ago. Ezekiel, by prophet, he was a high priest in the temple of Jerusalem. And in his time, Jerusalem was captured by the Babylonians. So Ezekiel and all the high society were slaves for the Babylonians. They were working outside Babylonian in a river with the name of Chebar. The group of men were working, and all of a sudden they heard a noise in the sky. They all looked up there. Then they realized that something is flying down from the sky to the earth. Ezekiel, as a priest, he believes, of course, that God is showing up to himself. He falls down on his knees. He wants to praise the Lord. By the way, in the original Hebrew text of Ezekiel, the word God does not appear. He always speaks about the highest, not God. On top of this strange vehicle which has landed now, Ezekiel sees something like a glittering gem, and in there something like a throne. And on this throne, something like a man in glittering clothes were sitting. Ezekiel calls the whole thing here, the whole object, the splendorness of the highest, not the splendorness of God, as in your British Bible, the splendorness of the highest. He sees 4 beings, and all these beings had 4 wings. And these wings made a terrible noise. He compares the noise with the thundering of a waterfall, or the noise of some battle wagons. Then, as next, he sees 4 wheels, and he cannot understand these wheels, because wheels on his time go forward and backward. The wheels he sees here, on the splendorness of the highest, they go forward, backward, but right and left at the same time, without making a steering movement. They can go in all 4 directions without them moving. Under these wheels, he sees some legs, and he clearly writes, the legs were glittering like metal, etc., etc. I will not have an Ezekiel speech here. Some 25 years ago, I had a secret speech at NASA in Huntsville, American Space Administration. Secret because both parties agreed we do not go to public. Nobody tells that we were talking together. And among them were the highest NASA specialists in construction erection. One of them was an ex-German man. His name is Joseph Blumrich. And after my speech, we had dinner, and Mr. Blumrich came to me and said, Erich, that was quite interesting what you was talking about Ezekiel, but in the Bible, you will never find technology. The Bible, these are wishes, dreams, just imaginations, but definitely no technology. He also said, I was the first who introduced to him Ezekiel. He never read Ezekiel before. Now he will do it. And the next weeks he did it. Mr. Blumrich took a Bible and started to read carefully Ezekiel, phrase by phrase. And slowly he started to understand that this was not imagination, that was technology. He did not put one word aside. He used the whole text of Ezekiel to recalculate and redesign what was the splendorness of the highest. And it looked like this. Now this is of course not a mother spaceship. With this thing you can never travel from star to star. You have to have a mother spaceship in orbit around the Earth, like before in the Indian text, the cities on the firmament. And from this mother spaceship, smaller vehicle came down. The old Indians called them vimanas. The Egyptians called them winged sun discs. Ezekiel calls it the splendorness of the highest. It's always the same. On top of it, he sees something which is glittering like a gem. It's simply the command space capsule. He sees something like a throne, and somewhere he's sitting in there. It's the chair of the commander. Then he describes the 4 wings. But what kind of wings does he describe? He compares the noise with the thundering of a waterfall, with tremendous loud noise. Sand was blowing up. According to the Bible, Mr. Blumrich from NASA reconstructed the wings, and it was in reality a sort of helicopter. Ezekiel even describes when the wings stood still, the wings were hanging down near to the ground. Soon as the wings started, the noise started again. Then he describes in detail the wheels. Now wheels in Ezekiel's time, they go forward and backward. But Ezekiel says they went forward, backward, right and left, all at the same time without making a steering movement. When you're sitting in your car, you have the steering wheel. You turn the steering wheel, so your front wheels are turning to get into the curve. Ezekiel's wheel goes forward, backward, right, left, without making the steering movement. So at NASA, they reconstructed a new wheel. From the central axis, the wheel is separated in different small axes. Each axis has an own axle. Look, it looks like this. Of course, with this wheel, you can go forward or you can go backward. At the same time, the wheel, the lower axis, can turn towards you. The wheel is fixed. It never makes a steering movement. Exactly as Ezekiel described. And finally, the legs out of metal, etc., etc. When you read Ezekiel, ladies and gentlemen, you will realize that he explains the splendorness of the highest from chapter 1 to chapter 39. And in chapter 39, something new starts. Ezekiel writes that the splendorness of the highest returned a second time. So this being was coming a second time. At this time, a being came out in a glittering suit. And this being brought him to a very, very high mountain. He makes it clear it's not a high mountain, it's a very, very high mountain. And beneath him, he sees something like a small city or a big village. And in the center of this village is something like a gigantic building or comparable to a sort of temple. What was a temple some thousands of years ago? A temple was a place where the gods were living. So this splendorness of the highest, Ezekiel is sitting up there next to the co-pilot. They bring him to this very high place on the mountain. Finally, the splendorness of the highest sinks down into the so-called temple, which means the temple had no roof. Otherwise, he could not go in there. Then the vehicle comes to a standstill. Ezekiel comes out, and there is another glittering being who comes across Ezekiel and says, from the beginning, you humans, you have eyes to see, but you see nothing. You have ears to hear, but you hear nothing. And then the strange man, the strange being, gives to Ezekiel a measuring device and orders him to measure the whole building completely. Ezekiel, in the meantime, he has learned that these beings are not God. That's something different. So he is courage. He asked the stranger, why should I do this? Why should I measure this building? And the being in glittering clothes says, that's the reason why we brought you here. Why? I will just come back to this a little later. In Germany, we have a German engineer. His name is Hans-Herbert Bayer. And he wanted to know if this building, which Ezekiel measures, if this is a real building or just fantasy. Because you can have all the measurements in the book of Ezekiel, starting from chapter 40. So the building was such and such long, so and so large, so and so high, had so different wings, etc. You read all this in the Bible. So the German engineer wanted to know, are these measurements real measurements or is it just imagination? And like the Americans at NASA, the German engineer started to calculate, taking all the figures from Ezekiel. And finally, he had the so-called temple. The temple was in reality just the base on Earth, the ground station for the extraterrestrial Vimana, the flying machine. Of course, I brought the German engineers together with the American from NASA, and both fit together very, very precisely. The building was nothing more than the basic station for the extraterrestrial space shuttle. At this moment, we have to say a few words about the Bible translation. Personally, I consulted 30 books of 30 specialists of the Old Testament. And each one of these 30 specialists came out with other conclusions. They say Ezekiel had a vision of God. He was sitting in a flying chariot, God. Now, personally, I am a deep believer in God. I am still one of these people who pray every evening. I never lost my God. But my God does not need a vehicle in which to move around from point A to point B. My God does not have a vehicle which makes noises, crumbling like waterfall, sand is blowing up. So, then in the Bible it says, the theologians believe that Ezekiel had a vision of a future temple in a future Jerusalem. Now the problem is, when you know the Hebrew in original, the original has from the grammar has no future. It has present. Now, because the theologians believe that Ezekiel has a vision of a future temple in the future Jerusalem, they translated the whole text in the future form. So, for example, you read the Bible and say, there will be on a high mountain a new temple. This temple will be such and such long, such and such long. Will be means future. But in reality, the original text does not speak in the future. He speaks in the present. There is a building, such and such long, so large, etc. Then Ezekiel absolutely could not have had a vision of a future temple, a future Jerusalem, because he speaks, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. In Jerusalem, or near Jerusalem, there is absolutely no high mountain. We made the computer animations after we had the work of NASA, Blumrich, and the work of the German engineer. We ask ourselves, how does this fit together? And here is the result. Ezekiel, 3,000 years ago, captured with others on the river Chebar. Then they hear a noise coming out from the firmament. They see an object coming closer and closer. The noise becomes incredibly loud. They're all afraid. Ezekiel, by profession, is high priest. He believes in the beginning that this is the Almighty God. So he falls down on his knees. And then he realizes that this whole thing is not God. He calls it the splendorness of the highest. And he's clever enough to write about every details, about the wings, about the noise, about the legs, about the wheels, which can go in 4 directions without turning itself. He describes the wings which hang down when they stand still. He says the wheels could move in every direction. That's why NASA reconstructed a new wheel. By the way, NASA has a patent, an international patent on that wheel. But the whole idea comes from Ezekiel. Then he was taken, himself was taken up to the seat of the co-pilot. Ezekiel, when they start, he says, and the hand of the highest pressed upon my chest. He feels the gravity when they start. He does not know where they go, because he says they brought me on a very, very high mountain. I assume that the pilot just next to his seat explains to the human, Ezekiel, don't be afraid. Enjoy it, watch, observe everything. Later you have to write about this. So Ezekiel realized that there is something like a big village or a small city, and in it is something, a big building, like a temple, a place of the gods. He himself is sitting in here. The splendorness of the highest makes a curve and comes to a standstill directly over the building. And then slowly, the splendorness of the highest sinks into the building. And at that occasion, Ezekiel realizes that the noise of the wings are at this time double as loud as before in the desert. Because here now, he has the echo of the sound, the echo of the noise of the wings. It comes to a standstill. This glittering being comes out and gives to Ezekiel a measuring device and asks him, or orders him, now you have to measure this building. And Ezekiel has the courage to ask back, why? Why should I measure this building? And the other one says, that's the reason why we brought you here. So why did it have to measure the building? Imagine the situation, ladies and gentlemen. 3,000 years ago, there was no technology. A group of extraterrestrials observe a group of humans, like ethnologists would today. They observe a village of some natives. Of course, the ethnologists learn the language of their observed group. So it is not surprising me when the others speak the language of Ezekiel. They observed it. Language was, by the way, never a problem. Our ethnologists, they went to the upper Amazon River or to the upper Nile in Africa. They came together with complete different cultures. None of these cultures had a language like English or German or French or Spanish. They all had some complete strange languages. But it was only a question of 2 or 3 months, and the ethnologists spoke the language of the native. Language was never a problem. You can learn this. So they take Ezekiel, they bring him to their very, very high mountain where they have their basic station for their shuttle. They order him to measure the station, and then they bring him back to his own people. Now his people were all witnesses. They all saw the vehicle coming down. They all believe that God himself took Ezekiel away. And now he's back. They ask him, hey, Ezekiel, where have you been? What have they done with you? And Ezekiel says, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. There was a gigantic building. I had to measure it. Here are the measuring dates. And he gives it the measuring dates. Because the whole society believes that it was God, the Almighty God. Such a report of a human, Ezekiel, will never be just thrown away into the trash. It will be written down in the holy books of mankind. And even if the humans have war in the coming thousands of years, they fight against each other, the holy books will not be destroyed. The holy books survive. We have it. I mean, we have the Old Testament, we have the Torah, we have these holy books. And that's exactly why they did it. Ezekiel asked the man in glittering clothes, why do I have to measure this building? And he said, that's why we brought you here. They knew exactly. Civilization will grow and grow. Evolution will grow. We will develop technology. And one day in the future, we will read this holy text. We are still believers in God, but we don't believe any more nonsense. And then we read about the wheels, about the legs, about the noise, and we realize this is not God. This was technology. It was made for us. Ezekiel asked, why? Why should I measure the building? And the other said, that's the reason why we brought you here. They knew exactly that in the future we will realize that these were extraterrestrials. And that's why it all took place. Today we have the modern explanation. There are other fantastic writers in the past. One of them is called Enoch. Now, Enoch, you read in the Bible only two phrases. It says, Enoch was the seventh patriarch before the great flood. And Enoch was the first human who disappeared from our planet in a fiery chariot. So that's all you read in the Bible. But Enoch himself was the author of a book, the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch was found by an English man some 150 years ago in an old library in Ethiopia. So the Book of Enoch came from Ethiopia first to England. And here it was translated. And from England there were some German version made. Now when you ask for a Book of Enoch, the book store will probably not have a Book of Enoch, because the Book of Enoch are part of large theological volumes. In our language, in German language, it says the Apokryphs and the Pseudepigraphs of the Old Testament, translated by Professor Dr. Emil Couch, Volume 2. In there you find Enoch. Enoch writes, he was a boy, 12 years old. It was evening. The whole community of the village wanted to sleep. And then they heard a noise in the sky. They all ran out of their huts. They saw something coming down. And then all ran away. They are all afraid, because two beings which looked human-like, but they breathed differently. They had some kind of helmets or halos around it. Two of them came close to it. They all ran away, the whole village, except Enoch. The 12-year-old boy was standing there. Finally, when these two beings came close to him, he's afraid too, and he also fell on the ground. And one of the strangers says to the 12-year-old boys, don't be afraid, human. Don't be afraid. We won't harm you. So Enoch stands up on his foot, and they say to him in his language, if he wishes, they will take him with him, and they will bring him up and will teach him. Enoch says, yes, I'm proud to be with you. So they walk away for a few meters, and one of the strangers says to Enoch, human, you stink terribly. You smell terribly. I don't know what kind of clothes he had on. He had to put away all his clothes, completely naked. He had to jump in the water and to wash himself, his hair, his body, down to everything. Then one of the strangers gives him a cream, and orders him, should put this cream all over his body. Enoch does so, and he smells on himself. And he said, hey, it smelled like ambrosius and honey. The next thing is some of the strangers give him a clothes, the same glittering clothes which they wore on. Enoch cannot understand what he has to do with it. So some of the strangers explain to him how to put the trousers on and everything. Once he's dressed, he looks down at himself and he say, I looked like one of them. The next thing is these three people, two extraterrestrials and Enoch, they go up over the planet Earth. Ezekiel is up there, of course, he has no word like spaceship. Enoch is there, of course, he has no word like spaceship. He says there was something like gigantic crystals. It was all glittering. We came close to it. Doors opened, doors closed. We came into a gigantic and big garden. There were flowers and vegetables which I never saw on Earth. Finally, they came to a big round place, and in the center of it is a throne. And there on the throne, the highest in person is sitting. Now, what I just explained is really the book of Enoch, but not in the sense I said it, because 160 years ago, Enoch was first translated from Ethiopian to English. At that time, we had no aircrafts. We had no flying machines. We had no spaceship, nothing. So the theologians at that time, all wonderful people, high intelligent people, they had to translate the sense of the book of Enoch in a religious term. So I just said 2 extraterrestrials arrived. In the religious textbook, you read 2 angels came down to Enoch. They say they have to put in the water and wash himself simply because he was stinking. In the religious version, you read he's now baptized in the water. Then he receives a cream and he put the cream all over his body. In the religion version, you read now he's gesalbt. I don't know in German. He now to become a priest. Finally, he receives his clothes, the same clothes as the extraterrestrials were on. In the religion version, they say, now he is dressed, he receives the garments of a priest. They go up. In my opinion, it's all clear. Simply in a space shuttle, they bring him up to the mother spaceship. In the religion version, it says now he's going up to heaven. He's flying to heaven with the 2 angels. Then he comes to this garden with different vegetables, different colors, flowers, etc. In the religious version, they say now Enoch is entering into the paradise with different flowers and vegetables. In reality, it was just a plantation in the spaceship. Finally, he comes to the round room with the throne where the highest is sitting. In the religious version, it says now Enoch is in the places standing before the throne of the Almighty God. In reality, he simply stands before the chair of the captain of the spaceship. So we misunderstood and we misinterpreted the whole book, not in a bad sense, because we had no other ways. Some 150 years ago, we had no technology of today. We had to translate it in a religious, psychological way. Enoch up there, he learns the language of these ETs. And soon, as he knows the language, he even gives their names. He says, and these are the names of the leaders. The name of the first is Jekun. He's the one who seduced the children of women. The name of the second is Asbeel. He gave bad advice to the children, etc., etc. Altogether, 36 names. So ladies and gentlemen, I know even the names of the extraterrestrials. Everybody could know it. It's handed down by Enoch. Enoch speaks the language, and he realizes that these beings wanted to have sex with some humans. Sex with humans? Are extraterrestrials looking like us? I came back to this point at the end of my speech. And it's, Enoch writes, but when the sons of the heaven saw that the daughters of men were fair, they admired them and desired to mate with them. And they said to each other, we will take them as wives. Altogether, they were 200, which descended upon Mount Hermon in these days of Jared. Jared is the father of Enoch. Now you say, sex, extraterrestrial sex with humans, this is impossible. But it's not only in the book of Enoch. Just read the Bible. Here, first book of Moses, chapter 6, verse 1. When the humans began to multiply and have daughters, the sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took them as their wives. I came back to this problem with sex with extraterrestrials later on. So we have written records in holy and non-holy books. I'm a specialist in it. I know at least 30 of these books. And more or less, they all tell the same thing with different names, different gods, different problems, different persons. But the story is always the same. And the same thing happens in Stone Age. At that time, in Stone Age, our forefathers were technologically primitive. There was no writing. So they started with cave paintings and cave chiselings. That is in Switzerland. That is in Arizona. Arizona, United States. This is in Peru. A very big figure. The original is 29 meters high. One arm points towards heaven, the other arm down towards earth. In the next. Here you have one figure, you hardly see them because it's again in Peru. It's on a mountain top and you can see them only from the air. It looks like this. We continue away from South America. This is in the Sahara Desert in Africa. Now between South America and the Sahara Desert are 8,000 kilometers. The next one, still in the Sahara Desert. Kimberley Ranges, Australia. Always the gods were represented with helmets or halos or rays around their heads. Still Australia, Kimberley Ranges. My question, why I show you this very fast, why had our ancestors, prehistoric, technologically primitive people, in different continents, in different countries, made the same figures? They had no contact together. There were no flying machines, no holiday ships, nothing. They all saw something similar. They wanted to represent the gods, the one who descended. And later, in evolution, our forefathers learned how to chisel figures. So now, they did not even anymore made them in caves. They chiseled the figure. In Central America, on the Caribbean Lake Sea, there is a Maya city called Tulum. And the whole city of Tulum is dedicated to the so-called descending gods. You always see the gods with spread legs, with wings, but they fly down from heaven. The original looks like this. You see the hands, the wings, spread legs, the head in front. They are descending. I love this one. He has even shoes on, descending, the wings. The original looks like this here. Here again, the shoes. So the whole city of Tulum is dedicated to these descending gods. And this is not, of course, continuation. Practically in every museum in South America, Central America, you find these helmets around their heads. And you ask the local archaeologists, what is it? Well, we don't know. Los dioses, the gods. It's always the gods. Far away from Central America, Japan. Japan, 8,000 kilometers away. There, the natives made these figures. They are called the Dogu figures. They were on altars. They prayed on them. But Stone Age people in Japan had no idea of glasses. What were they copying? What have they looked on it? This one is from Villahermosa. Villahermosa is in Mexico. You see the figure here has a helmet on. In modern eyes, he even has a micro before his lips. You see his hands are bending downwards the planet Earth, his legs up to the sky. In Arizona, we have the Hopi tribe, an Indian tribe living. And since eternity, they make figures. They paint the figures and they make them. These figures are called kachinas. When you go to the Hopi territory, you can go to a souvenir shop, and there you find some of these kachinas. They are little dolls in different size. And you ask the local, or you ask the local scientists, there's scientific literature about it. What is this? Kachinas. The kachinas were the ancient gods which visited the Hopi Indians and teach them some thousands of years ago. Teach them in astronomy, in mathematics, etc. And of course, these gods all promised in a far future we will return to this planet Earth. Gods of antiquity, they were always helpful. They were always teacher. They always teach some of our forefathers. And then the forefathers later, they named them prophets or teacher or whatever, because they learned something from the extraterrestrials, and what they learned, they teach to the rest of mankind. This is a worldwide phenomenon. And we can prove it, that extraterrestrials were here, because down under this pyramid, I will just show you a sensational excavation. The city here is called Palenque. Palenque is in Mexico, is one of the Maya cities. And this pyramid is called the Temple of Inscription, because up there some 810 Maya inscriptions were found. In 1952, the Mexican archaeologist, Professor Dr. Rutz, found up there in the ground some kind of grooves. So they started to chisel. They took a big stone plate out of it. And inside the pyramid, they discovered a stair. The stair was long, was going down under the pyramid, in total 7 meters under the pyramid. At that time, when they found the stair, it was completely full with stones. It took 3 years to put all these stones out of this staircase here. They were down under the pyramid and stand before a door which had the form of a triangle. The door was opened roughly, that's why a piece broke off, and they looked inside the room. At that time, of course, was it gitter? A grid, nice. At that time, of course, there was no protection. That's only now today for because of the tourists. So they looked into a gigantic room. The room was covered by a big stone. I say big, 3.80 meters long, 2.20 meters large, 1 block, weighing about 9 tons. And there was an incredible engraving on the stone, chiseling on the stone. There is something here around it like a frame. In the center of the frame, there is someone sitting, bending forward, almost like a racing motorcyclist. He uses his hand to manipulate control. You see the upper hand, he's working on this knob. The lower hand, you still can see the 4 fingers of his back here. He's sitting on a chair. The heel of his left foot is on a kind of pedal. And just outside the frame, you see something like a linking flame. Now in archaeology, they have come up with complete different explanations. When this was discovered, they said, this man represents Pakal, which is correct. Pakal was the second last ruler of that city of Palenque. And you know there is an inscription about it, and there we find the name of Pakal with his dating. So this is Pakal here. And they said Pakal is sitting in the open mouth of a mythological monster. Here they call this the upper teeth and the lower teeth, so like this. Pakal is falling into the mouth of a mythological monster. So he's dying. Out of his body comes the tree of life, or the cross of life. This here has nothing to do with fire in the eyes of archaeologists. It's just the stylized hairs of the beard of the weather god. Since 1952, in the scientific textbook, 14 different explanations have come up with this. Now, in our days, just since 2 years, the best and really renowned scientists in Maya epigraphy, epigraphy means translating Maya language, are the two Professor David and George Stewart from the University of Texas in Austin. They are the best men. And they discovered it, they deciphered now the writings. And they said, yes, it is Pakal, the second last ruler. But he's not falling into the mouth of a mythological monster. Neither is this the tree of life, or the cross of life, or the stylized hairs of the beard of the weather god. Pakal is leaving our planet. He's flying away back. They even found a date here which says 1,247,654 years back in time. And of course they found an inscription that Pakal one day will return to our planet. Now, I am always accused as I make a false interpretation, because one should not look at this stone plate crossways, we should look at it lengthways, which would look like this here. Now, I'm of course a man with imagination, and if I have to look it this way, lengthways, this brings me to a connection in the Far East. Just follow me. This is in Bali, Asia, Java. That's the called Temple of Borobudur. The Borobudur is composed of many hundreds of these things. They are called stupas. In Buddhism, the stupa has different meaning. One of the meaning is the stupa is the small vehicle with which you move to the big vehicle around the earth, the vehicle in heaven, the mother spaceship. That's why these stupas are not empty. In every stupa, someone is sitting. In that case, the young Buddha, because it's a Buddhistic temple. What is Buddha doing in here? He's sitting here in this position. He uses his hands to manipulate some control. He believes he is sitting in the small vehicle, the Vimana, to reach the big vehicle. So maybe it was all a misunderstanding. We should look at it like this. So, in the Far East or in the West, our forefathers have shown, chiseled in religious beliefs, the gods in their small vehicle. But we have made out religion and psychology out of it. In reality, it was all the same around the globe. Now I want to show you a few pictures about Nazca, because Nazca nerves me since my lifetime. Nazca is a desert in the south of Peru, 500 kilometers south of Lima. And when you fly over Nazca, you see first a desert with brown, rusty stones. When you fly a little higher, you see in the desert some figures. The figures look like fishes, monkeys, spiders, birds, but they are of such overdimensional size that you can see them only from the air. Then you fly a little higher. Then you see between the figures some lines. Some lines. These lines look like airstrips. I never said they are airstrips, but seen from the air, they look like airstrips. They start abruptly, end abruptly. The longest of these lines is 3.8 kilometers long. Between these airstrip-looking lines, you see smaller lines. The longest of these smaller lines is 23 kilometers long, right ahead, crossing over hills and mountains. right ahead. So this is Nazca seen from the air. Now Nazca nerves me because worldwide on television I always see some, was heißt das schon? Die Film da, die documentations. And in documentations on television you always see it is very, very easy to make it. You see some Indians are on the ground on the desert and just with their shoes they scrap away of the stones and you see a bright shining ground appearing under the brown surface. So it's bright shining, which is true. It's very easy. You can put away the stones and then comes a bright shining surface. But all this has nothing to do with these lines. That's not the same. These all are much bigger than the figures. The figures of fishes, birds, monkeys, etc. The largest of it is 29 meters. So this is 3.5 kilometers. It's completely different. Now in all these TV documentaries, you never see these pictures. You just see these figures in the ground and they explain to you how you can make these figures. But that's not the problem of Nazca. You see the mountains here, they come to the mountaintop from both sides. Not here. This mountain was completely cut off. By when? Why? And there's a zigzag line under this thing here. In the scientific textbooks, I learned what all this should be. First it said, it is an astronomical calendar. This is an astronomical calendar, okay? Then it says, no, it was a cult for the water gods. No, it's different. It was a cult for the mountain gods. Another one says it was a cult of agriculture. You can die in cults. The word cult is always something wonderful in archaeology. Every rubbish is called a cult. Then you say, no, it was a pre-Inca sport place, some sort of pre-Inca Olympia. Now you see here one of the geometrical figures. You can see them only from the air. And this geometrical figure is again linked together with these gigantic lines. You never see it on television documentaries. Here is the figure again. Hardly to recognize. The next idea, which I read, these are only Fata Morganas. The natives, they saw Fata Morganas in the clouds, and then they made these airstrip-like things. I hear it's a start place for hot air balloons. These are some acre plots. My God, acre plots. Now these are boundary makers. This is original Nazca. I made about 5,000 pictures of Nazca. I was flying over Nazca in the early morning, just after the sunrise. That's why these pictures are so precise. But you never see them on television documentaries. You see 4 of these so-called airstrike things, one next to the other. Cult for agriculture? Forget it. Maps? Nothing on maps. This is the normal road, the Panamericana. This is the desert. This, by the way, is 90 meters large. So it's not a small line here. And sometimes from these airstripe-looking lines, some smaller lines go out. And then from different sides, different small lines come to one point together. We have no reason why. Look at this. Put it in your brain. And when you see next time a television documentary about Nazca, ask the scientists, why don't you show us these pictures here? Why you just do as Nazca is only these figures of monkeys, birds and fishes, but the reality looks completely different. That's Nazca. So, another subject, which is, of course, part of my research since an eternity, is the Great Pyramid. You all know the Great Pyramid. And there are so many theories how this Great Pyramid was constructed. And most of the theories are reasonable. They are made by engineers, by clever, wonderful personalities. You can do it this way. They say they constructed a ramp from the Nile to the pyramid place. But there's a distance of 4 kilometers from the Nile to the pyramid, which means the ramp has to be 4 kilometers long. And as higher the pyramid grows, the ramp becomes higher. Finally, the ramp has more volume than the pyramid itself. It doesn't matter when you make a ramp around the pyramid. Finally, you have more volume than the pyramid itself. Of course, you can do it with these methods. But don't forget one thing. According to Egyptology, the Great Pyramid was constructed by a pharaoh with the name of Khufu, Cheops. That was about 2,500 years BC. His father, Snorfu, and his grandfather, they came out directly of Stone Age. Now, every technology, this technology, has an evolution in technology. Our forefathers were not stupid. They learned slowly how to make ropes. They realized that there were stones which were harder and other stones which were softer. They learned how to chisel it, how to transport it. It's all a question of evolution of technology. You don't have this technology just like this. You have to learn it, a process of evolution. And this process of evolution for that technology did not exist in the time of Cheops. Remember, his grandfather was directly out of Stone Age time. All these possibilities exist, but you have to have someone who teach you before, who learn you how humans you do it. It is not my idea that extraterrestrials made the pyramid. Humans made it. They always did the dirty work, but the knowledge, evolution of technology, where did it come from? Inside the Great Pyramid, we have different shafts. You will just see in detail later. The oldest god was Osiris. One of the shafts is pointing to Osiris, means Osiris is the same thing as Orion, the star belt of Orion. His wife, Isis, is the same thing as the star of Sirius. Now you realize that the 3 pyramids point exactly to the belt, the 3 belts of the star of Orion, and the other one to Isis, to Sirius. Inside the Great Pyramid, we have 3 different rooms, and you see the rooms are in different distances, one to the other. The distances are the same as the distances of the 3 inner planets from the Sun: Mercury, Venus, the Earth. Not the same distance. The pyramid is not just composed at that one place by coincidence. The distance to the North Pole is the same as distance to the center of the Earth. So we only have a few little things, curiosity, which they could not have known at their time. They knew nothing about Mercury which surrounds the Sun. So how is this possible? Inside the pyramid, by the way, when the pyramid was finished, it was all covered with stones. It never looked like this as it looks today. Still down here you see some of the old stone. That was all covered completely with stone. Some of the old Arabian writers say the pyramid was constructed before the Great Flood. It was not made by Cheops, Khufu. The pyramid was constructed by a guy which they call Zaurit. And then they say Zaurit is the same figure which the Hebrew community calls Enoch. Now you know in the meantime who Enoch was. He was taught by the extraterrestrial. And when he came down, before Enoch left our planet Earth, he came down again to our planet to say goodbye to his family. His oldest son was Methuselah. And Enoch gave his books, more than 100 books, scientific books, to his son Methuselah, and told him, now keep these books carefully for the mankind after the Great Flood, because all this was done before the Great Flood. In this building here, you have 3 main rooms. One room is called the King's Chamber, another room is called the Queen's Chamber, and under the pyramid, you have the 3rd room which is called the unfinished room. To climb up there, you first climb up this 23 meter. That's only about 1 meter high, which means you go down on your knees. Then you come to what is called the Great Gallery. Now, this is 8.5 meter high, 47 meters long. Down here, you have just come out of this small shaft. So, why have the constructors of the pyramids first made this small shaft, not big enough to transport a sarcophagus inside? And after 23 meters, you see this gigantic thing here. We don't understand it. So, there are 3 rooms there: the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and the room under the pyramid, the unfinished chamber. I now go with you into the queen's chamber, which is the chamber in the middle. And there you see a hole in the wall. And I show you this because of my hand. You can compare how big, how small, how large is this. It's about 14 centimeters, the opening. We are here on the south side. The same hole is on the other side, on the north side, exactly on the same height. Now you have to learn that these 2 holes, south and north, exist only since about 110 years. Before 110 years, the walls were closed. There were no holes. Then a British man came, his name was Dixon. He had a little hammer. He was looking for treasures. He hammered on the wall, and on 2 places it sounded hollow. And only now they came with hammer and chisel and opened these 2 holes, one here and one on the other side. In whole archaeology, they say these are shafts, but only symbolic shafts. Symbolically means that the soul of the pharaoh can disappear into the heavens. And in archaeology's textbook, they say these shafts are more or less 2.5 meters long, not longer. And then came a German engineer, a friend of mine, Rudolf Gantenbrink, and he constructed a robot. The robot was constructed out of steel. He had, of course, video cameras, halogen lights, electric motors, 4 wheels, caterpillar, anyhow. It was called Apuaut. Apuaut is an old Egyptian word, means the opener of the pathways. So now the robot first started inside 2 meters horizontally. The little light you see here is the laser beam, which measures the distance. Now when you see these pictures, you could maybe think, well, it's a large shaft. Someone can climb in there. No, remember my hand. It's just about 14 centimeters on one side. You cannot climb in there. Always the stones changed. Sometimes it was sandstone, then it was granite, it was alabaster. You will just see it later. Then something like opening doors appeared. The robot climbed up, down in the Queen's Chamber. Archaeologists, they put away all their clothes. They were completely wet, perspiration. They could not understand the situation. They had thought that the shaft is maybe 2.5 meters long. In the meantime, we are here at meter 16 inside the pyramid, slowly going up. Then grooves, vertically, horizontally. It looks as some thousands of years ago, something was pressing, trying to press something through the shaft here. The robot inside the pyramid continued. First it was 16 meters, then it was 26 meters, then it was 32 meters, and at 32 meters, a stone blocked the continuation of the robot. The stone was blocked in the beginning, the robot, but they had to put the robot back. They had to make him lower. He was too high. And finally, the robot took this obstacle and continues his way inside the Great Pyramid. That was on meter 32. Then it was meter 42. It was meter 52. And at meter 62, inside the pyramid, something like a door appeared. The door had something like two metallic bracelets. One was broken up, and the broken piece was not here on the left side, it was on the right side. The walls here, the stones, are alabaster. Alabaster is like a marble. Marble, okay. You see, the wall is polished completely. Now look, the small laser beamer went under the door, so we knew that there must be a continuation behind it. All this is roughly 25 years old. You probably heard something on television or read something in newspaper. But what happened since then? You read nothing, because the public is not informed. About 8 years later, the American Society, the National Geographic Society, has constructed a new robot. Yes, and this new robot had a drill. With this drill, they could make a hole in there. So they made an international television show, and they said, no, for the first time, because we have a hole in the wall, for the first time, we put a camera through the hole, that the world public can see what is behind this little door. They always put life in there. It was simply the next lie, because it was not life, and they had the camera already 3 weeks before through the hole. They knew exactly that behind this wall there was nothing. If there would have been some secret, they would never have shown it to the public. Now, still the camera went to the hole and made a photograph of this wall. This wall is 22 centimeters after the hole. It comes 22 centimeters and then this wall. All this is now about 18 years old. What happened since then? A rich man from Singapore came and he constructed the next robot. And he said to the antiquity department in Cairo, my robot can destroy this wall, and then we will see what's behind it. But the archaeologists in Cairo said, no, you are not allowed to destroy this wall. All the permission we can give you, you can make a very small hole, very small, not bigger than for an endoscope. With an endoscope you go into your stomach. So when you have a wall with the hole, and then you have 22 centimeters later the next wall, you need a long driller. That's why this robot was constructed. It was called Jedi. They made a hole, small hole. They put an endoscope through it. And with an endoscope, you just make small pictures, not big pictures, but hundreds of them. And the computer put these pictures together. So what is behind the wall? The next room. The next room with polished walls. And here is something which we cannot understand what it is. It doesn't look like a writing. But whatever it is not hieroglyphic. And at Cheops' time, they would have written in hieroglyphics. So we don't know what it is. Now, when we were talking about the construction of the pyramid, I said it's all an evolution of technology. When you plan a construction like this, and you plan different rooms, different shafts, you have to plan all this before you start with the stonework. That means engineering planning. In the meantime, because of modern technology, we know of about 1 kilometer of shafts and small rooms inside the pyramid, which means the planning for engineers becomes much more complicated before you start the construction. And this planning does not fit into the time of Cheops, coming right out of Stone Age. Something is wrong. And I said, some Arabian writers, and I mean all Arabian writers, 2,000 years ago, they said that the Great Pyramid was not constructed by Cheops, but by Saurid. And Saurid is the same which the Hebrew community calls Enoch. Then we have an explanation. Always more rooms. Now, under the Great Pyramid is another room, which normally no tourists had a chance to go down there. You enter the pyramid, It looks out like if you would go into a Swiss rock in a Swiss mountain. And then you come to a crossing point where you have to decide, do you climb up this narrow shaft and this great gallery, or do you go down? Down means under the pyramid here. The way down here is 119 meters. Imagine that, 119 meters. You have to chisel out to plan before you construct the pyramid. Then you come in an underground room, which is called the unfinished room, which makes absolutely no sense. In the year 827 AD, the Caliph Al-Mamun was the first one who broke the walls of the pyramid, and he entered into the pyramid. He also was down here in that unfinished room, and he said in his writings that down there he found 3 different rooms with 3 different technologies, and there were some mummies with some human-like figures which had elongated heads, long heads. And next to each mummy was some writings which he and his scientists at his time could not decipher it. So he was so impressed that he himself, he changed everything down here, that no one later after him could come down here and destroy or find these mummies. I was down there many times. I always had one of these small hammers. I always knock on the wall, and sometimes it sounds hollow, but you cannot continue. You are under observation by cameras. You can do absolutely nothing down there. So, about 2,500 years ago, the Greek historian Herodotus was in Egypt. Herodotus, you know, in school, they tell Herodotus was the father of history. And Herodotus has published 2 books, volumes about Egypt. And in the second book of his histories of Egypt, he says, he was in Thebes. Thebes is today's city of Luxor on the Nile. He was there. And the priest showed him, to Herodotus, 241 statues. And the high priest gave a short commentary to each statue. And at the end, the high priest said to Herodotus, these 241 statues represent 11,340 years. At that time, 11,340 years ago, the gods from the firmament have come down to teach the humans. Since that time, the gods have not returned. 11,340 years? For Egyptologists, this is all nonsense. History of Egypt starts in our scholar meaning 3000 BC, but not 11,000. Now, Herodotus made this statement 2,500 years in the past, which means to the 11,340, we have to add 2,500 from today, which roughly comes to 14,000 years in the past when the so-called gods were here, according to Herodotus. In archaeology, all this was never taken for serious. Archaeologists said, what is he telling about 11,000 years? The same Herodotus writes that under the pyramid there is a lake, a small lake, with absolutely clear water, and in the water lies a sarcophagus. Also, this statement of Herodotus was never taken serious by archaeologists. In the meantime, this lake under the pyramid was found. Of course, we were down there. The entry up here is on the side of the Great Pyramid. You can climb down. You come to in a small room, and from this section here, you go down, straight down into the rock. But anyhow, this shaft is so large that there was room for 2 ladders. You see it here. Then you come to a small room. And in this small room, 7 niches are cut out of the rock. But only in 2 niches we found some sarcophags. This one is black basalt, which means volcanic stone. The next one is granite. I have been told that they found that there was nothing in the sarcophagus. If it's true, I have no idea. Now from this point you go further down, right? Continue into the rock. Now you saw the shaft before was so large that 2 ladders had room. It's not the same shaft, it's smaller, only 1 ladder. It's room for 1 ladder. Down you have to climb around the corner, and of a sudden you stay before a small lake. As Herodotus was writing 2,500 years ago. And inside the clear water you find a sarcophagus covered by water. Now imagine, the pictures are not the best. We could not use flashlight here. As soon as we use flashlight, it's like a mirror. It reflects. You would see nothing, but here you can see the sarcophagus. These 2 wooden pillars here came from our time because they opened the lid of the sarcophagus and they put the wood between that the lid would not fall down back. Also here I was told that they found nothing inside the sarcophagus. I cannot judge if it's true or not. But Herodotus was right. There is a lake under the sea. He was probably also right with his 11,430 years. We have to learn a lot. All these people who think that there are no more secrets in and around the pyramid, they will be surprised what comes out in the next years. Maybe one day we find the books of Enoch in the pyramid. You know, we have 1 book of Enoch, the one which was found in an Ethiopian convent and came to London 160 years ago. But Enoch, in this 1 book, he says that the teachers from the sky, they taught him, and he wrote 100 books about all this scientific knowledge. Before he left our planet, he gave these books to his son Methuselah with the order, keep them for the generations after the great flood. So until today, we have not found the book of Enoch. We have only 1, the one from Ethiopia, not the 100s. So I would not be astonished if in the Great Pyramid we find books of Enoch. And then we have the next shock on this planet. Because we humans, we are very strange people. You see, on this planet, roughly, there are 2 kinds of humans. One kind is religious. It doesn't matter what sort of religion. The other kind is scientific. Now, the religious people, they believe that God, Almighty God, created everything, the universe, the planets, the plants, the trees, but as crown of creation, God made us, the humans. And the scientific people, they think everything is evolution. Evolution, mutation, selection. But we are on the top of evolution. So in both cases, if you look at it religiously, crown of creation. If you look at it scientifically, top of evolution. In both cases, we are the greatest. There's nothing greater as us. We don't want to have extraterrestrials. We want to stay as being the greatest. We have a psychological problem. And that's why this has to come slowly to the surface. We have to learn by the book of Ezekiel and others that something is completely wrong in the past. We have to learn that heaven was not heaven, it was space. Angels were not angels, angels was extraterrestrial, etc. We have to retranslate the old books and we find the new truths. And one day we will find books of Enoch in the Great Pyramid. And I hope that until today we are not shocked anymore. Now, some thousands of years ago, these extraterrestrials promised our forefathers that they will return in a faraway future. Yeah. You see, when Christopher Columbus first came to Central America, the natives believed that he's the long-awaited God, a God who returned. The same thing happened in Central America. Hernando Cortes, he came together with Moctezuma. Moctezuma was the king of the Aztecs. Even the king of the Aztecs fell down on his knees. He believed that the Spanish is the long-awaited God. The same thing in the South Sea. James Cook, for example, when he first came to Hawaii, the natives fell on their knees. They adored him. They believed that he was the long-awaited God. In every time when a high society, a high technology came together with the lower technology, the people of the lower technology always believed this is something magic. This is something from the gods. They adored it. So the idea of returning of some gods is not a Christian invention. That was existing long time in all these tribes who died. And what do we have today? I was educated as a Christian. We Christians, we believe that one day Jesus will return. But as I know, the Muslim society is believing the same thing. They believe that their Mahdi will one day return. And of course, you are familiar, the Jewish community believes since more than 5,000 years that one day the Messiah will return. So this expectation of somebody who will return is not only in ancient cultures, still today, alive in our religions. We all expect the return of some religious leader. I'm afraid neither Jesus nor Messiah nor Mahdi will return, simply extraterrestrials. And they are already observing us today. And they are learning. And they are doing already things with humans. Just remember the speak of Linda Moulton before. I am always accused, does this Mr. von Daniken not know that the distances between the stars are measured in light years? So the next solar system is roughly 4 light years away. It is not possible to reach these distances. That's what our scientific community tells to our students. But that's again not true. Everyone here knows this machine here, the American Space Shuttle. With every shuttle, you can transport a heavy load of roughly 30 tons. Now it's always a question of money. Do you have 4 shuttles or do you have 20 shuttles? If we would have 20 shuttles, we would start every week and not every few months. Every week we would shoot 30 tons of heavy load in an orbit around the Earth. And around the Earth, they start to construct with these prefabricated objects a gigantic ring. It has to be a ring. As soon as the ring is finished, the ring turns around its own axis. By doing so, you create a centrifugal force, which is an artificial gravity. You are not heavyless inside these things. You have bottom under your feet. And then, of course, you need an engine, not liquid engine as our primitives engine of today. If you imagine that such a gigantic thing could move with only 2% of the speed of light, only 2% of the speed of light, it would reach the distance of 10 light years within 500 Earth years. 500 Earth years, nobody will survive this. It's not necessary. We call these things mother spaceship or generation spaceships. On board, you love, you make children, you die. It's not annoying. There you find British food, Italian spaghettis, maybe Swiss cheese fondue. There are all kinds of things. So maybe only the 25th generation will reach a goal. Now we have been taught in school that our planet Earth has a unique position in the universe because the planet Earth is not too close to the sun, it's not too hot, it's not too far away from the sun, it's not too cold. Our situation is wonderful because we have a good temperature and we have water. In the meantime, NASA has found over 3,500 other planets outside of our solar system, and some of them are Earth-like. NASA has given a press conference last year and said, by calculation, only in our Milky Way, we must count with about 4.5 billions of Earth-like planets. Only in our Milky Way, not in the whole galaxy. So the astronomers here, they of course make their measurements. They will finally out which sun has Earth-like planets. The mother spaceship, the generation spaceship, cannot make a landing. It will always stay in orbit. That's what our ancestors have written. They were brought up to heaven. They were taught in heaven. In reality, it was space. It was the mother spaceship. Now, from this orbit, they sent down smaller vehicles. Today we call them space shuttle. The old Indians called them vimanas. In Egyptian, the winged flying gods. Every culture in the past had a word for these so-called space shuttles. Now the commander of the spaceships gives order to the crew who goes down on the planet, we give you 500 years time to build up an industry so that the industry is strong enough to reconstruct a second mother spaceship. 500 years. How old is our technological society? 150 years, 200 years? When did we start with our engines, machines and so on? Now they don't have to start in the beginning. Evolution of technology, they don't have to start. They have all their data in their computer. The mother spaceship tells them exactly, listen, on this continent there you will find oil. You will find this kind of minerals, etc. So we give them not 200 years, we give them 500 years to build up industries. After 500 years, we have a second spaceship. And now it becomes very interesting. There was once one spaceship leaving the Earth. It was 500 years on the way. After another 500 years, we have two, the old one and the new one. Each one is 500 years on the way. Then you have 4, then you have 8, then you have 16. Now a snowball effect starts to work. With only a speed of 2% of the speed of light, we would colonize our whole Milky Way within 10 millions of years. Only 2% of the speed of light, 10 millions of years. So always the scientific answer, it's not possible, we cannot spread out, it's just not true. And I made this calculation with the primitive, very primitive spaceship, and with a speed of 2% of the speed of light. Now in the beginning of my speech said that these extraterrestrials, these so-called angels, they had sex with humans. Even in the Bible, it says they mate with them. How is this possible? Evolution will go in complete different way. Extraterrestrials will never look like us. Maybe there are extraterrestrials out there with tentacles who look like flying elephants, but they're also human-like extraterrestrials. Why? This is a theory which has been brought forward by the Swedish Nobel Prize winner Svante Arrhenius. The theory is called panspermia. He says somewhere in our Milky Way the first intelligent form of life started. Now we say to the critics, stop. How did it start? In religion or in philosophy we say in the beginning was God and God was the Word. So we could ask, who made God? What created God? We have no answer. In science we say in the beginning was the Big Bang, was the Big Bang. But we have no answer what created the Big Bang. The first atom. Nothing comes from nothing, not even in astrophysics. So if we look at it philosophically, religiously, or scientific, we have no answer. Somewhere we have to start. Just give me a piece of paper and I make a perfect circle on this piece of paper. And then I give this piece of paper back to you and it goes from hand to hand. And I ask everyone the question, where did the circle start? Your logic will say, well, Mr. von Daniken must have started somewhere, but you cannot answer the question. A circle in itself is closed. It's like in the universe. So somewhere it started. The first intelligent form of life had an interest to spread out their own form of life in their Milky Way. Now you do not start with spaceships. This is in a much later phase. You simply infect a small sector of your Milky Way with your life sperm. This is called, for example, in our body. Just make this, and now you have a dust of your cells. In every cell, you have the DNA, desoxyribonucleic acid. In the DNA of each and every of you, you have the whole construction of your body with every little fingernails, every hair. It's all in the DNA. So, we know from tests which were made at the University of Zurich in Switzerland that DNA survives. Doesn't matter how cold it is or how hot it is. As soon as it's normal temperature, it continues again. So you, like dust, you spread out billions of DNA in a certain sector of a Milky Way. Of course, the one who start with this, they know exactly that the biggest part of it will come into the gravity of a sun, will die, or into the gravity of a complete planet like Jupiter, a gigant. So it could not work. But the little part of it will come into the gravity of planets which are similar than the one which they started. As I said, NASA says 4.5 billion of Earth-like planets. And now evolution starts. I have learned in school that it all started in the, in the primordial soup. In the meantime, I know by honorable scientists like Chandra Wickham Singh here in your country, that this primordial soup is not true. Life, the starting of life, of evolution, has come from outside. And all the rest is, in fact, evolution. But in the DNA, you have already the construction of your whole body. So we ask the question, why should extraterrestrials, by coincidence, be similar to us? Why should they, by coincidence, even think or feel like we? The question is wrong. They do not, by coincidence, are similar to us. We are similar to them because we are the offsprings. That's why they know exactly how we function, how our brains function. That's why they don't shock us. And this idea is also handed down in the great holy books of mankind. When you hear, you just know the Bible. And the Bible says, and the gods, by the way, the original Hebrew speak of the gods in plural, not God in a singular. The gods created human according to their image. We are offsprings of them. They know how we function. And that's not why sex functions. They had the same sexual apparatus as we. So the Bible and the other holy writings are right. They are like us and we are like them. And at the moment we are under observation again, and it's time that we change the spirit of time, the zeitgeist, that we learn slowly. We are not alone, we are not the greatest. They teach us, they help us. We don't have to be afraid of them. Now I have tried in 50 books to bring always new arguments out of archaeology, out of literature, to support my case. In the meantime, it seems that our modern science is on the way to support my case, not by the old historic books and not by archaeology, simply by technology. Brings einfach. Huh? Oh, stop. He just says, I forgot something. Start wieder nicht, haben wir vergessen. Ah, no, okay. Yes, sorry. I made a little mistake, but it's okay. You have seen probably many UFO films and UFO photos, and we are here in the UFO convention. And I will show you now very short a UFO film which cannot be falsified. Why? This UFO film was taken over the airport of Hernandez in Puerto Rico. It was on the date of April 26, 2013. The film was taken with the forward-looking infrared objective. And the object changed its shape and form. You see the exact distance to the object, but also the exact time. You see, in the camera, in the picture, you will just see. You see always new data which show how fast is the aircraft, how high is the aircraft from the ground, what is the exact geographical location, so length, weight, how far away is the object over there, how fast is it, etc. And all these data are in the picture, and because of these data, they change every 10 seconds. You cannot falsificate the movie. Just look at it yourself. Down there, no, das ist so nicht undeutliches Bild, ich meine, das ist so hure schal. You see all the data as well, it's hardly to recognize. And now in the center you see the UFO. Nicht zum Lesen, das Zeug. You see the dates change all 10th of the seconds, all over. The UFO was flying first over some fields, and then over the airport, Aguadilla, Hernandez Airport in Puerto Rico. The airport was closed for more than 2 hours. Then came the Caribbean Sea, the harbor and the Caribbean Sea, and the object finally flew into the waters, sank into the waters. And the pilot wrote me, he was looking, what is the object? And it took about 2-3 seconds, then he saw the object coming out of the water, and all of a sudden it was 2 different objects. And because of the dates, which change every second, 10th of the second, you cannot falsificate anything. Now it disappears, somewhere in the sea, Caribbean Sea. And then 2 of them come up. So we are under observation. Somebody is looking at us. Some 65 years ago, they found some Dead Sea Scrolls on the Dead Sea in Israel. And among them was that one scroll which was called the Abraham Apocryphic. Abraham was our forefathers, you all know. And Abraham wrote, he was sitting outside, it was evening, of a sudden the heavens opened. He saw a light coming down. Then 2 glittering men, looking like humans, but they did not breathe like humans, came to him. They speak his languages. They asked him if he wants to come with them. He said yes, like before Enoch and others. He went up. He comes to a gigantic thing which had the form of a ring, because Abraham writes, I wish to fall downwards to the planet Earth. If somebody wishes to fall downward, he cannot be on the earth. And he says, the heavenly place on which we stood once turned up and then turns down. I always saw the earth up and then the stars down. If you stay in a mother spaceship, it always revolves around its own axis because of the artificial gravity. But nobody could have known this thousands of years ago. Now, if a mother spaceship is on the way for, let's say, 500 years, when they come in the solar system, when they come in the solar system, they need energy. Whatever the energy is, maybe they need raw material, maybe they need uranium, they need just energy. Where do they take the energy? From our planet Earth? No. They don't want to hurt us, they don't want to steal us energy, but there is a lot of energy out. Between Mars and Jupiter is the Asteroid Belt. The Asteroid Belt is composed of 100,000 of stones and little planets. This is the asteroid Ceres. Ceres has a diameter of 930 kilometers, so it's a small planet in the asteroid belt. Since now 9 years, the American NASA has sent a probe, a space probe, to the asteroid belt to Ceres. And they delivered fantastic photographs from the surface of Ceres. And all of a sudden, they realized that something must be wrong up there. Because there is one of the mountains, and on one side of the mountain, you have something like scratched off. What is it? Did somebody took raw material from Ceres? And it was not us. We had no space technology in antiquity. It must have been something different. See it here again. And becomes even weird. The space probe down filmed a rectangular. Here, you see the rectangular? And in this rectangular, you have a square. This is an enlargement of the square. Bring it next. So, you see here? Now this must be artificial, but it was not us. We were not up there. So it seems to me that sooner or later, we don't need archaeological findings and stones and old writings of our ancestors about the extraterrestrial. We can prove it with modern technology out there, and everyone can see it. And we also have some of these mysteries on Mars. These strange things have been photographed on the surface of Mars. Of course, in science, we always look for the next reasonable explanation, which is reasonable, which is good so. But we are never sure. I should try to say. What is these things? Sooner or later, we will find out definitely with scientific knowledge and in our politics. We are not alone. Somebody was here some thousands of years ago. We were influenced. They created us. We are the offsprings. We don't have to be afraid. Now, this is my message. And what I do, ladies and gentlemen, has nothing to do with the new religion. You don't have to believe a word. I turn myself in my tomb if some idiots come up and make out of a kind of religion or sect of Erich von Daniken's way of thinking. That's not what I want. So why do I stand here? I simply ask the public, please look at these things from another view, from another angle, and maybe you come to another result, and another result is a new knowledge of our planet. Out there in the hall is a book stand, and I will just go out there, and there is a table, and I sit there, and of course, I try to sign as many books of yours as possible. And just next to my signing table, this young man is sitting. He's my private secretary. His name is Ramon. And you see, I have one of these pins here. Wait a second. One of these pins here. These pins are our organization. The origin of these pins were found in a tomb, in a very high tomb of a rich old Indian tribe in Colombia. Today the original is in the Gold Museum in Bogota. So we simply made a copy of the Gold Museum of this very old object, and we uses our pin. He has some of them. Now finally, I want to say thank you to the Awakening team. They made everything, and they made it possible that you are here and I were here. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, I have to thank you, because without you, all we authors, we writers, we are nothing. Thank you very much that you have come here, and thank you.